Hey all, Kathy Beal here with a couple of additional words about the Virgo full moon lunar eclipse. It's going to take place late in the evening on March 13th in the western part of the United States and pretty much everywhere else during the morning of March 14th. This is the second in a series of eclipses in the signs of Virgo and Pisces, now that the North Node has moved into Pisces. That started in September 2024 and will go into early 2027. And this one occurs while we're in the crossover between this eclipse family and the one that we're wrapping up, which we have been in for the past 2 years since March of 2023, in the signs of Aries and Libra with the North Node in Libra. The Aries Libra eclipses have been pushing all of us to be much more self-focused, self-actualizing, self-generating, self-motivating, and to worry a lot less about what's going on with other people. It's been forcing us to rewrite our relationship ground rules and weight them toward the side of the individual. And that final eclipse, the final eclipse that sends off that family, occurs at the end of March. But before then, we have this lunar eclipse in Virgo, which is very, very different energy. So unlike the Aries Libra lunar eclipses, the Virgo-Pisces eclipses with the North Node in Pisces throw us into the context, the energy of all of existence. So we go from really getting pumped up to be individual actors, and then we are thrown into situations that show us that we're all in this together. So all these individual Lone Rangers have to figure out how they're going to deal with each other. And the month of March has an incredible mixture of this forward, highly individualistic, aggressive, impulsive, passionate Aries energy, and the free flowing, we're all drowning in each other's business. Life is more than just money and fighting, feeling the pain and sorrow of all of creation, Pisces energy. So in the middle of it, the Virgo full moon brings boundaries and borders and clear thinking and pickiness and criticism into the picture. This Virgo full moon is a recurrence of one that happened in March 2006. And three things that happened in March 2006 caught my attention. They may end up having some relevance. One is that Twitter was founded then, and the first tweet was sent out. The second is that the United Nations formed the UN Human Rights Council, which the current administration pulled out of last month. And the third thing is that there was a presidential election in Belarus with claims of fraud and interference, and there were massive protests in the street, and the election was thrown out. So let's look at, I'm going to share the screen. We're going to look at a little bit more about the chart of the full moon. I want to point some things out, and then we're going to look at how this affects the United States and the person who's occupying the White House at this moment. Now you'll see that I have an arrow at the top pointing at the moon, which is at 23 degrees Virgo. And if you look at the bottom, there's an arrow pointing at the sun at 23 Pisces. And this chart is cast for Washington, D.C. So when this lunar eclipse full moon happens, it's going to be going across the two houses in the chart that represent communication, thinking, messaging, beliefs, the laws, the legal system, our relationship to other countries, so foreign relations, international relations, a really big factor in it. And if you look down at the bottom where that right pointing arrow is, you'll notice that the sun has some company. It's next to Saturn, which represents order, rules, containment, confinement. I call it the planet of adulting. It's a planet of accountability and reckoning. It's close to the sun and opposite the moon. And then the sun is near the north node, which is the direction we're all heading in, and Neptune, which is the ruler of Pisces. And this is the last moon that we will have. This is the last moon on this axis, the Virgo-Pisces axis, that we will have with Neptune in Pisces during our lives, because at the end of the month, it's going to move into the sign of Aries. So there's something here having to do with revelations. That's a factor of a full moon. Revelations, huge dramas escalating, departures, chapter closing, milestone ending, possibly involving how we run the government. There's Saturn, possibly involving a leader, someone in authority. The church state configuration could be an issue with this as well. You'll notice that there is an arrow on the bottom right pointing at Uranus. Uranus, the agent of the agent of unexpected radical change. It's an awakening influence. On February 12th, it hit the degree 23 Taurus. So on that day, it was exactly trine or in an unbroken flow with where the moon now is, and it sat at that degree, kind of building strength like a storm in the Gulf, as we used to say when I lived in Texas. It sat at that degree until just a couple of days before this event. So it is now at 23 and it's moving forward. Things are now moving ahead that got stirred up by the Leo full moon on February 12th. Things started exploding open then. The wrecking ball, you can look at the news, the wrecking ball started going like crazy. This Uranus's role in this event is, since it's in a trine, it's moving away from a trine to the moon, this adds to the unpredictability, brittle, sudden, chaotic nature of revelations and things that break apart and leave, making them all the more shocking. And you might say, what could shock us at this point? I hate to say there is something that could shock us. We'll find out what. One other thing I want to point out is the red Mars sign at 18 Cancer. Mars has also just started moving noticeably. Mars was retrograde from December 6th until February 23rd. And on that February 12th date, it was sitting at 17 degrees of Cancer. It sat at 17 for a long, long time. And just on the 9th, it moved to 18. Why am I saying this? It's finally starting to move ahead from its retrograde. And as it moves ahead, it's going to make an opportunity aspect. First, it's going to flow naturally to with Saturn, and then it's going to make an opportunity aspect to the eclipse moon, and then gradually it's going to trine or have an unbroken flow with the north node. By the time it gets to 29 Cancer, Neptune's going to be out of the picture, so it's not going to make another contact with that. Mars in this chart is in the house of allies and open enemies, so we can expect action rolling out from this full moon that has a lot to do with attacks on the homeland, Mars in Cancer, defending the homeland, Mars in Cancer, an adversary who has gotten into the homeland, Mars in Cancer. Okay, now here I have put the eclipse chart around the US chart. This is the Declaration of Independence signing. Look at the up and down arrow. It shows that the sun at 23 Pisces is in a direct flow or a trine with Mercury, the US Mercury in Cancer. That's messaging. That's how we think and, in this case, feel about 8th house. Our joint resources, our investments, also scary, scary things. And the sun is in the house of communication. So those kinds of topics are going to be big. Saturn is also in a trine with this, so there's going to be a lot of talk about, I am guessing there will be a lot of talk about corruption in the government, money in the government, money coming from criminality. The eighth house, where Mercury is the house of criminality. Um, the I didn't put an arrow for the sun and the moon, but you can see them. Look at the top of the chart. There's an arrow pointing at Neptune in Virgo in the ninth house. This eclipse happens with the moon, with the full moon, with the eclipsed moon exactly on top of the US Neptune. Neptune is idealism, it's beliefs, it's illusion, it's glamour, it's lying, it's deceit. In the sign of Virgo, so there's a kind of a pickiness or a granular nature to this. And this is in the house of laws, the government, belief systems, education, what's happening to the Department of Education. It's being sacrificed potentially. International relations. So there's something here about, oh, it's all, and sorry, one more thing. Neptune in Virgo in the ninth house is a marker for two things: separation of church and state. With Neptune opposite that has certainly just eroded like crazy. And immigration and racism, those are big issues with this too. So there'll be things coming to light about foreign relations. There could be some ending of a chapter involving our alliances, our boundaries, our borders. We're already seeing a lot of this happening with shakeups in our dealings with our closest neighbors. I will also mention this eclipse is happening across North America, so it's affecting Canada, the US, and Mexico. And, there's a lot of arguing going on about the borders and tariffs and all kinds of other stuff. So there will be some massive milestone coming out of this. Saturn is exactly opposite Neptune in the US Neptune at the point of this eclipse, bringing messaging and information potentially about a leader into the mix, and it coming from a foreign shore would fit in with it. This is something I have been saying for a long time. I know it's kind of whiny. I have an arrow pointing at Jupiter, which is just crossed over into the house of allies and open enemies, and it is in a trine or an unbroken flow with Saturn in Libra in the 10th house of our public status. So there's going to be a lot of talk about, well, there increased in knowledge of information about open enemies having something to do with our government. That has certainly been a topic of conversation building up to this eclipse. The courts could have an awful lot to do with the Jupiterian things that are going on. Jupiter makes more. Who knows? There could be dual administrations coming down the pike, as bizarre as that sounds. Let's wait and see what that might be. But, the courts have been flooded since January 20th. It's when I think within minutes of the inauguration, lawsuits were filed. So they're going to start being more and more prevalent, and they could be clamping down on the expansiveness of the person who's supposed to be the employee of the country and not the dictator of the country. Pardon me for a tiny bit of opinion leaking into this, but the courts definitely have been going in that direction again and again and again and again and again. And will laws be enforced? This seems to indicate that it's going to keep on happening. Look at Mars in Cancer in the 8th house of joint resources. It is moving toward a conjunction with Mercury. This will be happening in April. So before Mars makes its way out of the whole Cancer trail that it's been in, it will actually hit the US North Node again in May. So a long journey And right now we're retracing. Mars is currently in a position that he occupied in October 2024. And as he moves forward, coming out of this eclipse, there's very likely to be messaging hitting that. I did not put an arrow at it, but notice that Uranus at 24 Taurus in the sixth house of how we run things on a daily basis. Uranus in Taurus has been blowing up the systems of government, blowing up the co-worker situations, blowing up the patterns, blowing up the normal course of business. More information about that coming out with this eclipse because there is a sextile or an opportunity aspect between that Uranus and the U.S. Mercury. And Uranus, as it makes its way out of the sign of Taurus by May or so, it is going to be in an exact trine to the U.S. Pluto. So there will be some revolution, massive change, perhaps evolution in how we do things, in what we value, and maybe even like our monetary system and our own resources as a country. So this is an extremely important event. One other thing I'll point out, the U.S. Mars at 21 Gemini, just above the seventh house cusp, is squaring, so it's in a T-square. Should have highlighted that. I'll make a little mess. I'll make my little annoying drawing. So we've got the sun, the moon on top of the U.S., Neptune opposite the U.S., opposite the sun in the sky, and Saturn all squaring Mars, So it's making a T-square to Mars. Mars and Gemini in the seventh house of allies and open enemies. So there's something here that could force information, active information of attacks out from allies that will have an impact on our own beliefs, our own legal system, our own government, our own the authority at the top of the government. This would be consistent with NATO, the EU, other allies starting to take action. That becomes very uncomfortable for the positions that some people are taking right now. And this could also be the eclipse that forces out the information that many of us have felt for a long time is overseas. That will have something very important about what happens with this administration and how long it lasts. This could also be an indicator of trouble coming for not the person who's acting as a contractor and doesn't really have any constitutional authority to be what he's doing, running around firing people and setting things up so that his businesses get better deals, and you know who I'm talking about. Okay, so let's look at what this is doing to Trump. Really big stuff. The double-pointed arrow going down the middle shows his sun and his moon. He was born at an eclipse, actually. The sun and the moon opposition with his nodal opposition. All of this is it's all being squared by the lunar eclipse. So you see there's a giant X mark down the middle. This is a grand cross. It's very tight. It pulls him in multiple directions. It has a time slowing feel to it. As this is happening, I have not yet mentioned, Mercury is stationing retrograde. It's at 9 degrees Aries, and on the 15th, it actually makes its turnaround for its first retrograde of the year. Venus is already retrograde. The Mercury retrograde will be completely embedded within the Venus retrograde. Both of these are taking place in Trump's 8th house of investments. It's also the house of criminality. It's also the house of other people's money. And so Mercury pulling into its retrograde station, causing an atmosphere of time stopping. And then we have this feeling of being drawn and quartered isn't quite right. It's more like the Hanged Man in the tarot. Action is not possible. This is a situation that he will simply have to take. I know that's hard to imagine. And it does involve Saturn in the seventh house of allies and open enemies. So there's been a lot of talk about who he really works for and what government he really works for. And this could be a huge issue with a huge factor in whatever starts to happen to him because of this eclipse. And we're already feeling it. And the thing that I think is also extremely important in this is actually, there are two more things. First off, you'll notice that there's an arrow pointing at Venus. I've mentioned she's retrograde. This is going into the past. It could be women, could be money deals. It's in the house of other people's money. And Venus is squaring his Mercury in the 11th. This plus Mercury going retrograde could bring information out into the open. Remember, revelations and disclosures are part of a lunar eclipse about his money deals with other people, other countries, things that are not in our best interest. And that Venus at 7 Aries is opposite his Neptune at 5 Libra in the second house. I know it's hard to see, but it's right under the arrow on the left. Neptune in Libra in the second house is an indicator of his money coming from illusion, from deals that maybe aren't really deals, that come from money laundering, running things through, having a situation that looks like it's one thing, but you're really doing something else. And this being very, very stressed by both Venus retrograde, it hasn't quite completed the opposition as of the eclipse, but it will very quickly. And then Mercury right behind that coming over it. So watch for more coming out, more coming out, more coming out. And what is this going to do? Look at the topmost arrow. I have been talking for quite a long time about a wrecking ball hitting him. That is Uranus in the 9th house of his relationship with the legal system, foreign dealings, foreign relations. It's sitting right at his midheaven. That's the line that goes down the middle of the chart. The midheaven is the doorway to his career house and public standing, and it connects to the bottom of his chart, the doorway to his home, his sense of security, family, his base. Uranus has moved across this twice already. It moved across it early last year. It moved across it in the fall, and now it's just been sitting, waiting to actually cross it for the third time. You'll notice that the degree of his midheaven is 24 degrees, Taurus, 22 minutes. Uranus is now at 24 degrees, Taurus, 2 minutes. It's effectively there as of this eclipse, and it will day by day by day move more and more and more across it. And this is an explosive influence on his entire place in the world. The first time it happened was the event in Butler, Pennsylvania, which had a help from Neptune, the illusion maker. So no one's really quite sure what happened, what it was. We'll just leave it at that. The third time across stands to really shatter a lot of things. Let me give you a personal example. When Uranus moved across this point in my chart, within the span of about 6 weeks, pretty much everything that defined my life and security, that blew up without my doing anything except my car. I had the same car by the end of it. My family structure changed out of the blue radically. My best friend, my support structure moved out of the country unexpectedly. I was fired from my job. Uh, I went out of the country for a while. I came back for a vacation, and I came back. I got notice I lost my apartment because my landlord wanted to live in it. And then as soon as I got a new apartment, I was fired from my job. And then a week later, when I was still upset over having been fired and the way it happened, my relationship fell apart. So everything in my life went except my car in the span of a few weeks. Then this is happening again with him. And as it happens, it's it's in cahoots with the signature for his source of money here in his 11th house. He has Mars and Venus together in the sign of Cancer. This is family. He inherited the money. This is the Trump organization. The 11th house is a sign of organizations. It's also the house of Congress. Um, so Uranus is going to be breaking some things up. Maybe it offers the opportunity to be freed, to be liberated. We'll see what kind of liberation, but there will be shocks, there will be developments involving these issues with him. So just watch this space. There's a collapse that's coming. People have been saying, what kind of collapse? Well, Uranus does rule his house of health. He has Aquarius on the cusp of the sixth house. Uranus rules Aquarius. That could be a factor as well, but I am looking more at a lifetime of what he's built, just crumbling, absolutely crumbling. Like this is the Tower card in the Tarot. So if there is something, and I think we can say there's a given statements he's made and other things that all kinds of people have said, whatever led to where he is now, really important information, some of which goes back many years, perhaps as far back as 89, and we have seen 87 as a date. So when the courting began, we had an earlier iteration really soon after that of these current eclipses. So this is a real turning point. This is a real turning point eclipse. It's not a one-day event, but I am betting that there will be very startling, very shocking, very chaotic events around it. Take note, take care, safeguard your own peace, safeguard your own self. There's a concept of situational awareness. Don't go blithering around out like do when you're out and about. If you're out and about that weekend, if you're out and about next week, keep your wits about you, have eyes in the back of your head, listen to your gut. And if you're somebody who's been hanging on to popcorn, you might be eating a lot of it. So I'm going to stop the share. So just a reminder as a thank you for everybody. I have this lovely jewelry. Just as a reminder that you are entitled to a 20% discount at otterspirit.com for gemstone jewelry. This is lapis lazuli. This is carnelian. If you use the code Aquarian20, Otter Spirit is based in Monterey Bay, California, or Monterey, California, and the founders donate some of the proceeds to Wild Otter Care. So it's going to be quite a week. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you have not already. And I'm